Alright, so like I was talking about on the front, you ought to be able to see this and you can kind of see somewhat how it's moving. So I know this valve is going to be loose as far as I'm at top dead center.
What's going on, YouTube? This is Country Carter, and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, and welcome to the channel. I hope that you'll enjoy the content I have for you. Well, in today's video, I'm actually going to be doing some maintenance on the Africa Twin behind me. It's one of those that Honda recommends every 8,000 miles or 12,000 kilometers that you do some maintenance that I've not yet done, and I'm right at 14,000 kilometers. So we're a little over, but I think it's going to be okay because all it is going to be your valve adjustment, change out your spark plugs, and I know I just changed the oil not too long ago, but I'm going to go ahead and change it. That way, you know, I'm ready for the spring riding season and I can just get on it and go and not have to go ahead during the middle of it, you know, and stop and change the oil. So let's get going. I'm going to kind of walk you through how to do the valve adjustment first so that if you have one of these on the Africa Twins, that you're able to do it yourself.
Alright, so hopefully you can see down up in here, but I've got to get access all the way into here, which is where the top of your valve cover is on your, your cylinder heads. So in order to do that, the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to be taking the seat off so that I can take the fuel tank out. So let's get the seat off. Alright, now that we got the seat off, let's take these 4 screws right here off. You know, I got 2 of them on each side, so let's get that off. Alright, so the next thing is going to be taking the 4 screws that hold the cover for your air filter. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to take your fuel shut-off knob off, and in there, in the center of this, is going to be a Phillips head screw. And so you're going to want a long Phillips head, screwdriver, so that it'll reach in there, and it's a number 2 Phillips. So let's take it off. And it does look like it's somewhat kind of keyed. And I'm going to assume the reason why you're taking that off is because as you're lifting the fuel tank off, you're not got very much room as far as where the frame goes, so that's going to be the reason why you want to take that off. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is actually going to take your 2 Allen heads, screws out right here, and it's a number 6 Allen. That way we can kind of start lifting it up and see what else we got to do. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is actually going to be taking a piece of wood, and I've got to lift the tank up, and I'm going to slide this underneath here. From what the manual is saying, under your stock seat you may have a little prop that is kind of attached underneath it that actually goes in here into these 2 screws that we just took out to kind of help hold the back of the tank up so that we can get over here and remove your fuel out lines and everything else. So let's go ahead and lift this up, and I'm glad a piece of wood since I don't have the prop. Alright, so on this side of your motorcycle, on the side that's got your gear shifter on the left side, you got 2 hoses right here we got to take off. One of them is your breather, and then this one right here I think it's going to be your overflow for whenever you overflow it or overfill it. So when I take those 2 off, and then on this side over here, right here, hopefully you can see, is actually where your fuel comes in, to your fuel filter and everything. So we're going to have to take this line off as well. So let's get those 3 hoses off. And I will probably be changing these out to regular hose clamps because I kind of hate these spring-loaded type. Alright, so I went ahead and took this side cover off right here, and also my brake reservoir, because it's going to be easier for me to get this hose on right here on and off, so just make myself a little bit easier. Alright, now with all that off, it says I can take the fuel tank out, so let's see how heavy it is. With I think I got about half a tank in here. I did go try to ride a little bit, but
Alright, so as you can see, it wasn't very hard to get that fuel tank out. You know, you had your 2 bolts that mounted it there in the back. You had your 3 hoses you had to get out, and then of course your air breather, you know, you had to take that off, and then your 4 screws that's holding your side covers on there. But other than that, the fuel tank was very simple. It wasn't very hard or heavy, but I've only got about half a tank of gas in it. Let me show you one little part that you might need to watch out for, because you know, your fuel tap hangs down just a little bit, so it doesn't have very much clearance right here at this part. So this is the part that I was talking about, is right here, you know, so I had to kind of push it just a little bit more forward in order to get some clearance right there. But after that, you come on out. All right, so that's access to your rear cylinder. It does say that if you don't need to do with the front cylinder, that this is as far as you got to go in order to adjust the valves on the rear. But I'm going to adjust both the front and rear, so let's go ahead and get what we need to get off of the front so that we can get to that access cover. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to be taking our right hand side fairing off. In order to do that, you're going to take these 3 screws off right here, and then there's one more down here that's holding your cover that's going to your horn. That way we can get to your right hand side radiator that's wanting us to remove. So let's take these 3 screws out and that one down there. And they're Phillips head screws. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing on this side over here, because it kind of dawned on me that it's been a year since I've had this bike and I've never actually changed the radiator fluid, so it may be a good thing to go ahead and change the radiator fluid as well. So let's go ahead and take this side off as well, so we got access to the left hand radiator. Alright, so in order to take this right hand radiator off, we need to actually take this right hand protector off right here. In order to do that, we're going to take these 2 bolts off, one at the top and one at the bottom, and they're 8mm, and that'll give us access a little easier to the 2 bolts that are holding your radiator on. Alright, now that we got the protector off, let's go ahead and take these 2 bolts off so that we should be able to move the radiator in and out a little bit to get access to our cover over there. And once again, these are 8mm bolts. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to unplug your radiator from, you know, the fan, so that we can get this loose right here. Alright, in order to pull this off your frame, there's a little tab down here on the very bottom that you just kind of pull in back towards you and then release it. And this is what tab I'm talking about, is this tab that's right here. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to take your 2 hoses off right here, and this is going to be the hose that's going over to your left hand side along with this one. So as you saw, radiator fluid is coming out, so I went and grabbed a bucket so that it will catch all of the radiator fluid. And now it doesn't come out, but hey, better safe than sorry, because I imagine it's going to come out when we take this one off. Alright, Alright, so as you can see, the radiator fluid did come out of the upper radiator hose on this side. And I know for a fact that when I take the lower one off, it's going to come off. So I also forgot to mention about your overflow valve or your overflow hose right here. So we need to take that off, and then after that, all the radiators should come off. Alright,
Alright, so it still wasn't coming off, as you can see, and I happened to look, and behind this little rubber tab right here is going to be another bolt, and I'm going to have to take that out, and now the radiator should come completely out. And there's the radiator. Alright, so kind of like the other side, I'm going to go ahead and take this radiator off because it'll actually help us do a couple of things. One, I'm wanting to get as much of the radiator fluid out as I can and change out, put fresh radiator fluid in it. But number two, right behind here is actually where the other spark plug is for the front cylinder. Something I didn't know whenever I changed the spark plugs before, but the Africa Twin for the 93 model has actually 4 spark plugs. 2 in the front and 2 on the rear cylinder. So this actually helped me get to it, easier and everything. But like I said, it'll also help us get some more of the radiator fluid out so that we can, get fresh radiator fluid in there. So let's take this off and go from there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 screws off after we got the radiator guard off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the 3rd bolt that's going to be back here so we have something to help us hold it up while we take the other 3 hoses off. Alright, now that we got those off, let's take the 3 hoses off, and we should be, besides this 1 bolt, should be able to take it off. Alright, so I took the lower radiator hose loose, but because of your oil cooler right here, I'm actually going to go ahead and take this 3rd bolt out. I said I was going to wait, but I don't really have a lot of room to work with. So hopefully by taking this bolt out, I should be able to get this upper radiator hose off a little easier, and also the lower. And it's also in the same spot as the other side that I showed you. Alright, so as you can see, we got the radiator out. Now I've got access to our spark plug right there that I wouldn't been able to get to quite as easy. Alright, so let's get back on this project. It's one of those that's been a few days since I've been able to work on it due to the weather outside. It's just been kind of nasty and cold and everything. And I really don't have a heater other than a little space heater or jet blower back there. And so I kind of hadn't been wanting to come down here very much. But I got to get this done. So the first thing that I was going to tell y'all is that in the meantime, I've kind of looked at the process a little bit more. And the first thing that I realized is that I'm actually going to have to take the air cleaner right here off. It does make sense because a couple of the access holes for your valves are right underneath where it is. So that's one thing that I didn't realize whenever I was doing the last part. And the second thing is how to actually drain all the radiator fluid out of there so I didn't make a mess like I did. And let me show you right where that drain plug is on your Africa Twin. Alright, so down here on the side, the got your gear shifter on the left side. Right below it, right here, is where your actual drain plug is for your radiator fluid. So that's going to be the first thing I do is I'm going to go ahead and drain all the radiator fluid out of here so that I can put fresh radiator fluid in it. Alright, so it's going to be actually a 10 millimeter to take that bolt loose. Alright, by looking at this, I'm going to say that's pretty nasty, so I guess it's a good thing that I'm wanting to change all of the radiator fluid out of it. What do y'all think? Alright, so to get your air box off, what you got to do is you got 3 mounting screws, one right here, one up here at the top, and then one on the other side right there. Besides that, you're going to have to take your breather hoses off right here. so that you can, start lifting it up. And then on your carburetors, you got one band that is holding, the air intake to it. And then the same thing on your other carburetor is got the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and take these loose and this breather hose is loose so that I can kind of tilt it back, because I really can't get to the bolt right there because it's in the way of the frame. So hopefully by kind of being able to tilt that back a little bit, you should be able to get access to, where that is. Unless it's, keyed like right over here, in which case I could just take it off without having to do that. But in my case, I'm going to lift it up. And these are 8mm bolts. Well, mine just kind of popped off. That's all right. So they may have been sucking a little air between them. I kind of make sure whenever I go to put it back on that I put it back on, with a little tighter. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get something to cover your carburetors up. That way nothing kind of falls in there, because that would be a bad thing. All right, so now that we have our two carburetors covered up so nothing will fall in there, let's start working on rear cylinder. And what we're going to do is we need to get this inspection cover, and I'm just going to loosen it right now till I have, till I have all four inspection covers loose, because the manual actually wants us to start working on the front cylinder first. So, but I want to go ahead, because this is a little easier, let's go ahead and then work on our rear cylinder. And this right here is covering your exhaust valve on your rear cylinder. You have one exhaust valve, but you have two intake valves, which is covered by this inspection cover right here. This nut right here is actually a 27mm, which is the same as your axle nut. It just so happens that I do have the supplied Honda wrench, and I think it's going to make this a lot easier getting this loose with the little bit of limited amount of room we have right here. Like I said, I'm just going to loosen this for right now. These right here, you have two of them, one on each side of your inspection cover on the intake, and these are 8mm. All right, and on your front cylinder, it's kind of in the same location, but kind of reverse. They're kind of turned in the opposite directions. So your inspection cover for your intake is here on the back side, where you have, again, on your intake, you have two bolts that are holding the inspection cover on. And here's a closer look at where your inspection cover is right here. And like I said, your other bolt is right here on this side. All right. So you see I've got both of these inspection covers still kind of covering up so that nothing can fall into the engine. And right here is your exhaust inspection cover on your front cylinder. Alright, now that we've got our four inspection covers loose, the next thing we're going to do is that we're actually going to be taking one of the spark plugs out of each cylinder. What that'll do is it'll allow us, whenever we're turning the motor over, to turn it a little easier, because with one spark plug on each cylinder, it won't be building up compression. And that's kind of what makes it a little harder when you're turning the motor over. After we get one of these spark plugs out of each cylinder, I'll show you how you're going to be actually turning the motor over. Alright, so the spark plugs I'm going to take out, it really doesn't matter. Well, yeah, it kind of does. And I'll explain to you here in a little bit why. But I'm going to take this spark plug out right here on the rear cylinder, and I'm going to take the corresponding one out on this side in the front cylinder. And what that'll do is, whenever we're turning the motor over, you're going to have to make sure that you're on the compression stroke. Well, it's easier to get your finger over the hole of the spark plug on this side right here and on this side, rather than the one that's all the way in the center of the motor. So that's the reason why I want to take this one off right here. And I'm going to be using the Honda supplied spark plug wrench, and the reason being, if you have the gas tank on here, you can't really get to this spark plug without using this because of the frame rail right here. So that's the reason why I'm going to go ahead and use it, because it's a little easier just to use it. And it's a 10 millimeter, and so that's what I want to be using to get this spark plug out. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to get access to our timing rotor, and what that timing rotor has is your timing marks on it, and we're going to use the bolt in the center of that to actually turn the motor. The two inspection covers that we need to remove are right here on your left hand side of the motor. And so we're going to remove this bolt right here and then this small one right there, and up here is where your timing mark's going to be, and right here is where your bolt's going to be. So this bolt right here is going to be a 10 millimeter. And this one up here is going to be a 6 millimeter. Alright, so in order to turn your motor, what you're going to be using is you're going to be using this bolt right here. Alright, so that bolt that I was just talking about is actually a 17 millimeter bolt. And the next thing that is very, very important is that you're going to see me motion it, but I don't really directly come out and say it, but you're going to want to turn the motor counterclockwise. The reason for this is that that bolt is actually a reverse threaded bolt, which means in order to tighten it, you turn it left-handed, and to loosen it, you turn it right-handed. Well, you're not wanting to loosen that bolt, because if you do, it'll be a very, very bad thing for that to come loose. And by going clockwise or right-handed, you'll be actually loosening that bolt, which is what you want to do. So make sure you're turning it left or counterclockwise, and you'll be okay. And what this bolt is going to be doing is going to be turning the rotor in here, and you're going to be looking inside this little hole right here, and I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to see it or not, but what you're looking for is some timing marks. One of them is going to be FT, and the other one is going to be RT. What the FT stands for is your front timing mark, and your rear RT is going to be standing for your rear timing mark. And what that does is that kind of gives you an idea of when you're at top dead center. And I got something else I'm going to show you here in just a second to see it, what I'm talking about. Alright, and another thing what I'm doing, the reason why I'm on this side, I've got this hand, is I'm actually going to be putting my finger over the hole of the front cylinder, and I'm going to be feeling for compression. You should be able to start hearing it build compression as the cylinder is coming back up on the compression stroke, which is what you want to be on, is your compression stroke on your front cylinder. Alright, so I can feel the cylinder coming up, and because I can feel compression on my hand or my finger. Alright, one thing you can use, what I was just talking about, is you can use what they call a bore scope. What it is on the end of here you have a camera that I'm going to stick inside of the cylinder, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to watch the cylinder come up to the top dead center on this screen right here. And so what you're doing is you're wanting to watch this screen and watch it come all the way up, and at the very top it's got like, you'll be able to turn it just somewhat, and it'll actually kind of have a momentum where it's at dead still at the top of the cylinder, and that means you're at top dead center. I feel like I'm at top dead center, so I'm going to look inside this hole right here. And like I said, I don't know whether you're going to be able to see it or not, but I will try to get a picture of it where you'll see I'm at the FT timing mark. Now that I know that I'm on the compression stroke, a last check to make sure that I am on the compression stroke and that I'm at top dead center, Honda said that all three of these valves right here should be loose. And so I'm going to try to wiggle them. So another thing that I failed to mention right here is that if the valve is not loose, you're going to want to turn the motor 360 degrees so that you're going to be on the compression stroke. If the valves are tight, that means that, or one of them is tight, that means that you're actually on the exhaust stroke and not the compression stroke that you need to be on in order to adjust your valve. So if it's actually on, if one of them are loose, go 360 degrees or one revolution counterclockwise and you'll be on the compression stroke. And I can wiggle that one. And maybe I can get to it from right here. But I can wiggle that one. And I can wiggle that one. I know my hand was kind of in the way, but hopefully on the rear cylinder, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. All right, so it may be kind of difficult for me to show you how to get the filler gauge in there and everything, but I was going to go ahead and tell you that from the manual, I can tell you what the filler gauge sizes are. And that's going to be on your intake valve. It's going to be 0.13 to 0.17 millimeters, and the exhaust is actually going to be 0.18 to 0.22 millimeters. It's one of those that I'm going to shoot to go in the center, because if you go to one extreme or the other, especially if you go to the too loose extreme, you'll be readjusting them, pretty quickly. But I also don't want to go too tight. The reason why I say you don't want to go too tight right here is there's a couple of possibilities that you could cause. One, you could actually cause the camshaft to round the lobe on the cam off, and that means you're going to be replacing the cam. But also number two is that if it's too tight, then you're going to actually be pushing the valve down too early, and that has a possibility of the piston coming up and slapping the valve, and that's definitely not going to be a good day. And it's one of those that you really don't know how true that filler gauges are, so by going in the center, you still have a little leadway on both sides. Alright, so here's the filler gauge that I'm using. As you can see, I'm using it as a one that has a right angle on it. And the reason being is, as you can see, it's kind of difficult to get a straight one in there. So like I said, I'm going to use this one right here that's angled and try to get it in there. Alright, so as you can see, I've got it in there. It wasn't too loose and it's not really too tight. What you want it to do is you want it to have just a little bit of drag whenever you try to slide it in and out, and which it does. So I don't need to adjust this valve right here. Alright, so I ended up switching to a different filler gauges because the other set I had didn't go down this low, but as you can see, this one goes down to 0.15 millimeters, which is, like I said, in the center of that range. Alright, as you can see, I've got that one in there, and once again, I'm not going to need to adjust this one because it went in, had a little bit of resistance to it. It wasn't too sloppy, so I'm going to leave that one where it's at. Alright, and then there's that one. Once again, this one feels pretty good going in and out. It's got a little bit of resistance. Alright, now that I got the front cylinder, both the intake and the exhaust adjusted, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put those inspection covers back on there, and then we're going to rotate the motor to the rear cylinder. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you kind of where like I was talking about, is I'm going to put my finger over the hole, and then as I'm turning it, I'm going to be listening or feeling for the compression on the rear cylinder. Hopefully you could hear where it just pushed out my finger. So now, like I said, I'm going to use my bore scope because I've got one, but if not, you can keep looking inside your inspection cover for the RT to come up. And by looking at it, I'm pretty close. So because I feel like I'm pretty close, I'm going to go ahead and look inside here for the timing mark. All right. So as you can see, I was looking in there and I was just before getting there, so I was turning it real slow. All right, and like on the front cylinder, we're going to make sure that all three of these valves are going to be loose, and I will know that I'm on the top dead center of the compression stroke on your rear cylinder. All right, so like I was talking about on the front, you ought to be able to see this, and you can kind of see somewhat how it's moving. So I know this valve is going to be loose as far as I'm at top dead center. And I'm going to feel in here. That one's loose, and maybe you can actually hear it moving. And then this one's loose. And like the front, I'm going to start on the exhaust, and I'm going to go to a 0.20 millimeters. You can kind of see, I mean, it goes in there, but it's got a little bit of resistance as it went in. And then, like I said, on your intake, I'm using a 0.15. All right, so that one was good. All right, and this one over here was good. All right, so I'm not too overly surprised that I didn't have to adjust the valves. It's not one of those where you always have to do it. It's just like I said, the Honda recommends every 8,000 miles or 12,000 kilometers to do that. I just bought the bike, like I said, a year ago, and the guy told me that, you know, it hadn't been long since the bike had been rebuilt, and I'm sure that the last time he had the bike rebuilt or last time he had it serviced, he may have went to an actual Honda dealer overseas to get it done. So they may have adjusted the valves not too long ago. So it's not something that you got to do regularly, but it's one of those that it's good to check it, especially whenever you have no idea when the last time it was done. However, let me kind of see if I can show you how you would adjust them if you did need to adjust your valves. All right, so this is right here is your adjuster. And the way you're going to adjust your valves is after you know kind of somewhat how to adjust it, and I imagine that it takes very little adjustment right here, but what you're going to do is with a pair of pliers, you're going to hold your adjuster here, and then you're going to loosen your locking nut right here on the outside. Once you loosen that locking nut, and while you're holding the adjuster with some pliers, once it's loose, you're going to barely turn your adjuster either probably clockwise to tighten or counterclockwise to loosen, depending on what the feeler gauge is telling you. More than likely, you're going to be tightening them, so you're going to be going clockwise to move it down into the top of your adjuster. After you do that, you're going to tighten it back up, and then the manual says to rotate the motor 720 degrees or two full rotations. Once you do that, you use your feeler gauge to actually recheck these to make sure you're now within tolerance. If not, go back in, readjust it like I was just talking about, either loosening it if you went too much or tightening it if it's still not enough. All right, so hopefully that made a lot of sense. If you got any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll definitely try my best to explain it to you. And I will also kind of see if I can put on the screen right here all of the instructions that is in the actual Haynes manual so that you can, you know, follow it yourself if you want to. All right, so now that we got those checked and everything was good and within tolerance, let's go ahead and put our inspection covers back on and tighten all 4 inspection covers back up. Alright, so now let's install these two covers back on there on this side. Alright, so the last thing we're going to actually do is we're going to go ahead and change our spark plugs out. I've already got these out over here, but I still got to take this one out and the one up here on the front cylinder. Alright, and the spark plugs I'm going back with are the Honda NKG. I've used NKG for years, and that is right there is going to be your part number for these spark plugs. And you always want to make sure on your spark plugs that you're actually putting some anti-seize on there. That way they don't seal to your cylinder head. And if you don't get it everywhere, you aren't doing it right. Alright, so as you saw, that wasn't a very difficult process. You know, I mean, we're completely done with the valve portion of it. You know, besides getting the radiators off, getting the fuel tank off, and also getting your air box off, it wasn't very much other stuff you had to take off. You know, I mean, it's pretty simple. You know, I believe that if you take your time and, you know, you either follow my video or, you know, follow the instructions that I've included from the Haynes manual, you should be able to do this yourself. You know, I mean, it's not very difficult at all, but that's about all I can do. I can do an oil change, but I'm going to wait till the next video, because in the next video I'm going to change the oil, and also hopefully by then my thermostat will be in, and also the temperature sensors. And I don't really want to put the fuel tank on till those come in, because it just make it a lot easier getting to the temperature sensor and also the thermostat. And thanks to one of my subscribers, Tommy, I want to thank you for, you know, giving me the idea on, you know, flushing out all the coolant that's even in the engine. That's something that I didn't think about, so I appreciate that comment. Besides that, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment. Let me know if you feel like you could do this yourself, or, you know, if you see some steps that I could have done better. You know, I mean, I always like advice, you know, kind of like what Tommy did on that that comment, you know, telling me about that, because that's something that I didn't even think about. But, you know, share this with some of your friends, share this with some people that may be able to, maybe thinking about doing a valve job on their Africa Twin. You know, I'm sure the newer ones are similar to this. I can't 100% say that, but, you know, adjusting the valves is adjusting the valves. I kind of went from doing it on a car to doing it here. So, you know, it's pretty much the same process. But until the next video, always take the same route, and I'll see y'all then.